So my name is Purva Vaidya. I'm a medical oncologist over at UC Irvine, and I'm going to continue this morning's talk on targeted treatment in melanoma. So Dr. Daniels already introduced the concept to us earlier during his introductory presentation, and we're going to do a deeper dive. Before I get into the weeds of it, though, kind of wanted to start off with a little bit of a caveat. There are many therapies for melanoma right now in 2026. For advanced metastatic disease, immune checkpoint inhibitors are still the mainstay of treatment, but there are several reasons we can't use them long term. Melanoma might progress on immune checkpoint inhibitors, or perhaps a patient has comorbidities that make using it unsafe, or you could develop side effects that make it intolerable. And so targeted treatment is one alternative option, and we're going to talk about what that means and what's available right now and what research is on the horizon for it. So we're going to do a little bit of background on how cancer forms. So the basis of tumor formation is that cells in our bodies go rogue. They don't have regulation to divide and perform their functions properly, and they replicate in an uncontrolled manner and form a tumor. This is due to intrinsic factors such as mutations, or it can be to extrinsic factors. So think about in melanoma, maybe UV exposure or kind of environmental factors of the immune system. And how that relates to mutations in our DNA is that, well, DNA is kind of the code of life. We all have our own unique DNA, and the code that it leads to is making proteins in our bodies. These proteins have lots of different functions. They work together in signaling pathways and allow our cells to function normally, execute what needs to be done. And part of this role is to keep cells in check. So when something's going wrong, these signaling pathways might indicate that cells need to die. Sometimes, though, when we have mutated genes, we create abnormal proteins or no proteins at all. And then what can happen is that cells lose their regulation and become tumor cells. And that's how mutations kind of work. So the idea of targeted treatment is that if all these proteins have malfunctioned in our bodies and are leading to unregulated growth, can we give treatments that target directly where the problem is? And so I think that's best depicted by the A on this figure, where a protein's going, or a medication's going in and blocking a protein that might not be operating well in the body. So in melanoma, there are lots of mutations that have been identified that may have a role. The most common mutations, which Dr. Daniels mentioned, are the BRAF mutations. There's not only one type of BRAF mutation. There are several types of BRAF mutations, and I'll get into what that means. But otherwise, we also see something called NRAS mutations, which can be quite aggressive and found on chronically sun-exposed skin. c-KIT mutations, which are often found in April melanomas. These are melanomas that are found on our palms and our soles. And then there are other genes like TERT, CDKN2A, NF1, P10, TP53. They have implications for prognosis, but for a lot of these genes and these mutations, we don't have targeted treatment available just yet. So we'll talk a little bit about BRAF mutations. So actionable BRAF, what we call class 1 mutations, they occur in about 40 to 50% of patients with melanoma. It's an acquired mutation. One of the first questions I get in my clinic, if I tell someone they have a BRAF mutation, is, can I pass this on to my kids? And no, it happens in areas where you have intermittent sun exposure, and there are a few other characteristics that are associated with them, such as younger age, specific types of melanoma, such as the superficial spreading or nodular melanoma, or if you have an occult primary melanoma, or, as I mentioned, intermittently sun-exposed skin, so that can include your trunk. And they're part of this cascade called the RAS-RAF MEK-ERK pathway of protein signaling within the cells. And to take I'm actually going to skip, I'll go back to the slide, but skipping ahead, if you just focus on the right, this pathway, it's essentially one protein after another activating each other. And if that process is something goes wrong in it, we can have uncontrolled cell growth and a tumor can form. So these BRAF mutation kind of encodes for one protein in that. There are, I mentioned earlier that there are different types of BRAF mutations. They're not all equal. The 40 to 50% really refers to these class 1 mutations. These are the V600 mutations, and they are what we call RAS independent mutations. There are some more atypical mutations, the class 2 and the class 3. They work a little bit differently, and the specific types are listed down here. So if anyone has ever gotten a report kind of stating what mutations their melanoma harbors, they might say you have a BRAF mutation, but that's not necessarily a class 1 mutation. So how do we test for these? So there's several different ways to do it, and there's several different assays from different companies. But typically, your oncologist will get next generation sequencing on your tissue from your biopsy or your surgery. There's also ways to do it with just like immunohistochemistry in the lab, kind of how the sequencing report works too. But then, at least in my practice, I kind of just get it as a bundle. And this is an example of some reports spliced together, but this is just an example. So this report says that a patient has this BRAF V600E mutation, the class 1 mutation. It lists what therapies might be associated with it. In addition, I just want to draw attention that it lists other mutations to other biomarkers that might be present that we don't necessarily have therapies associated with. And this is a useful tool for oncologists and patients to kind of guide further therapy and talk about prognosis. So what can we do when someone does have an actionable BRAF mutation? So there are 3 combinations on the market of what we call BRAF and MEK inhibitors. And I just introduced a new word. So BRAF inhibitors are drugs that inhibit the BRAF protein, but we combine them actually with something else later on in the pathway. This is a MEK inhibitor. We do this after studies have shown 3 things. One, it has a more durable long-term response. 2, combining these helps prevent resistance to BRAF drugs. And then 3, there's some side effects that can happen when you just take the BRAF drug, but if you combine these, it can reduce the side effect of this. So studies have really shown us that combining them is the best approach. And then there are 3 different combinations that are available. There's dabrafenib, trametinib, vemurafenib, cobimetinib, and encorafenib, binimetinib. So they're all slightly different in dosing and how what the toxicity profile is. But I'm going to keep things a little bit more general here and talking about the common side effects we see with them. And so these are pills, they're taken every day. And a lot of patients get fevers with them. So pyrexia is up there, that means fevers. You get fatigue and headaches, eye toxicity. So you need to see your ophthalmologist while you're on these. I can get hemorrhage, so bleeding. It can cause pulmonary problems with cough or inflammation of the lungs. There are a lot of skin toxicities too. So some patients get rashes, but then other patients can actually also develop secondary skin cancer. So while you're on some of these drugs, you have to see your dermatologist every couple of months. It can affect the heart. So this can reduce your ejection fraction and cause like a heart failure. So before starting, you have to get an echocardiogram and you have to get it periodically while you're on it. Other things are joint pains, nausea, vomiting, decreased appetite, edema. And really, I think, immune therapy, like when you get immune checkpoint inhibitors, you're going to an infusion center, you're getting like an IV, you're sitting there, it's a whole process. And it kind of seems easier to take pills sometimes if you're kind of in that, if there's an indication to do so. But what I tell my patients is that these also have quite a few side effects, and sometimes it takes a little bit of tweaking to get people on the right dose and get them to the point that they're tolerating it. You still have to see your oncologist very regularly and do all the monitoring and get frequent blood work. So going back to my very first slide, now that we've kind of put everything in context, I wanted to reemphasize the point that in metastatic melanoma, though, even if you have this BRAF V600 mutation, we don't use these targeted treatments first line. This is based on a clinical trial, the DREAMseq trial, and what they did is they took patients with BRAF mutated melanoma, and they either gave them standard of care immune checkpoint inhibitors with nivolumab, ipilimumab first, or they gave them the targeted treatment with dabrafenib, trametinib first. And what we found is that patients did much better at the 2-year mark when they got the immune checkpoint inhibitors first. So standard of care is still to do immune checkpoint therapy first, and if there's a reason to move on, then we do the inhibitors. But this slide will go a little bit more into the more specific situations in which we use them. So in stage 3 disease, or when you've taken it out and there's an indication to do a year of post-operative treatment, patients benefit from getting the pills. There are times that and it's a discussion between patient and oncologist. There's no head-to-head trials to really say if getting the inhibitors after surgery is better versus the immune checkpoint inhibition. There might be factors in a patient's medical history, on a patient's NGS report, or another thing that the oncologist might make a recommendation. So this is really just a discussion to have with your oncologist. And then in metastatic disease, we use them after failure of immune checkpoint inhibitors, or if there's intolerable toxicity to them. And then another kind of way we use them that's very helpful is that if somebody comes in and they have a lot of melanoma in their body and we're quickly able to get that BRAF mutation status, we give these pills to rapidly reduce the bulk of disease. And then after 6 to 8 weeks, we can switch them back to the immune checkpoint inhibitors because they have a better outcome long term. But it's a really good tool to kind of bridge that therapy and get a response quickly, because they work more quickly than the infusions. So there are some other targeted therapies for the other mutations that I mentioned. These mutations are not as common, and a lot of these drugs are used in many other cancers. We see them used in some hematological cancers, lung cancer. So these are drugs like imatinib for KIT or crizotinib for ROS mutations. There's entrectinib and larotrectinib for NTRK mutations. Imatinib for NRAS. So these are typically they don't have that durable of a response, and we use them off label. So they're certainly not our first line treatment. But that's not to say things aren't being investigated, and there's a lot of exciting work happening. So there's a nice review written in our ASCO educational book last year about targeted therapies that are under investigation. So these are drugs that either target different proteins in that pathway that I showed, or target multiple proteins. There are other mutations that we are aware of that don't have established targets yet, so we're exploring that. There are other, there's overlap too between other types of mutations and other cancers, and perhaps there's a role for drugs that we use in, for example, like breast cancer, to overlap with melanoma pathways and use here. I would say that's really kind of where the future horizons are for this area of treatment. We need good targets for these atypical mutations, so the class 2 BRAF mutations, the class 3 BRAF mutations, also some of these less common mutations I've listed on my previous slides. There are trials ongoing to see what happens if you combine the BRAF MEK inhibitors with immune therapy. There might be a role for them in a neoadjuvant setting, although I don't think the preliminary data is really led anywhere with that. There's a role for it with brain metastases, and we're refining that. And then, of course, with these drugs, sometimes we develop resistance. I didn't get too much into that in my presentation, but I did mention it, which just basically means patients stop responding after a little bit of time. So we're developing things to overcome that resistance. So I'm exciting to see what's ahead for us. And I think we're going to take questions at the end, but thank you.